Good day, students. In this, our second lecture, we will look at how you must interpret the CAPS document, and I will introduce you to Bloom's taxonomy and tell you how to use that. So if you look at your CAPS document, you will see that in the beginning of your CAPS document, you are introduced to the main topics of the curriculum. Further on in your CAPS document, I think it's section 3 and it is page 13 if I'm not mistaken, it gives you an overview of the topics. In other words, it tells you that in grade, or the topic is tourism sectors, in grade 10 this is what you will cover, and grade 11 this is what you will cover, and then in grade 12 this is what you will cover. So each grade covers a certain amount of sub or topics under the main topic. Not only does your CAPS document tell you what sections you should cover under the main topics, it also per grade divides your curriculum into what you have to cover in term 1, term 2 and term 3 for each specific grade. It tells you the time, that the number of hours, the notional hours that you must spend on each topic or subtopic, and then it tells you what assessments must be done during that term. Now you will see that it tells you in week 1 under the topic tourism sectors, for grade 10 you're going to have to do an introduction to tourism. You're going to have to tell them what is tourism, the concepts, domestic, regional and international tourism, what is a tourist, why do people travel, and so forth. You'll see that in the first term you're going to have to do a test and you're going to have to do a project. But not only does your CAPS document tell you what topic you cover, what subjects or subtopics for each grade, it also tells you, it also links up with your textbook. So you will see it will tell you the topic, domestic, regional and international tourism, and in grade 12 those are the 3 subtopics you're going to cover. Then it tells you in week 1 you're going to look at global events of international significance, and you will see that that links with your textbook again, where it tells you the concept global event, the positive and negative impacts of global events. But I want to draw your attention to the bottom here where it says resources. Recent information should be accessed from the media. When we do the development of learning material, I am going to give you websites that you can go to, Facebook pages that you can follow, YouTube links that you can follow, but that is extremely important, the resources to keep up to date. If we just look at global events, the past weekend, a global event is something that happens in a specific country but involves countries from all around the world. Prince Philip's of the United Kingdom, his funeral, it would have been attended by 800 guests from all around the world, dignitaries, states, heads of state, but now it was a very, due to COVID, a very low-key affair, but still it was broadcasted and watched by people globally. So that is a global event. If we look at political, they also say chapter 2, the first section of domestic, regional and international tourism, you're going to look at unforeseen occurrences. The fires on Cape Town is an unforeseen occurrence. So your job as a tourism teacher is not just to teach your kids what's in this textbook, but also what's in the media, things that are recent. You're not going to find any textbook that's going to tell them about COVID. You're going to have to go to the internet, to magazines, to newspapers and give them that information. Now in the past, we had to use the CAPS document and then do planning for the year. In other words, in term 1, week 1 we're going to do this, we're going to do week 2 we're going to do that. That's when we're going to do an assessment. But what the Department of Education has come up with, they have given us an ATP, it's an annual teaching plan. In other words, they tell us exactly what we're going to do week 1 of the term, what we're going to do week 5 of the term. And the reason for this is, number one, they want to take some of the administrative burden away from teachers, but it also ensures that every school in the country and in the province has covered the same amount of work. So that when we get to a June exam, or when we get to a common test, some provinces and write common tests, that or when a child changes from one school to another, they've done exactly the same kind of work. Now you will see that this one talks about a recovery annual teaching plan. Now this means last year, due to COVID, there's a lot of work that was not covered due to schools being closed or children not attending school. They've taken stuff out of the curriculum. So this year we have to make up that work. So in grade 11, if there's certain sections that wasn't covered in grade 10, we have to teach that in grade 11 before we can start with the grade 11 work. The same for grade 12, because the years actually build. Grade 11 build on knowledge from grade 10, grade 12 builds on knowledge from grade 10 and 11. Now if you look at this document, it also talks about baseline assessment, and baseline assessment really means, what do the learners know? How do you find out what they know? You have a quiz, you ask them questions, you maybe give them pictures and ask them what do they see on the pictures. But baseline, it's nothing formal, it doesn't count for marks, it's for you to find out what do they know and what do you need to teach them before you can teach the actual content of the curriculum. Now when we get to assessment, CAPS tells us that we have to assess, and it tells us, you've seen on the previous pages, it tells you what assessments needs to be done every term. So the CAPS document is going to talk about formal and informal assessment. Formal assessment is everything that counts towards the end of the year mark, the progression mark. Progression meaning the marks that's going to make them pass the grade. So that will be your formal assessment. Now that your school-based assessment, so in term 1 there's going to be you're going to have to assess them on the term 1's work, and that will probably be a control test and a project. In the second term, under normal circumstances, they normally write a test and then a June exam. But now, due to COVID, the June exam I will show you on the next slide. We've got a recovery or a bridged curriculum where they've taken certain assessments out. But formal assessment is tests and examinations. Now, when we do assessment next in the second semester, I will talk more with you about the PAT. The PAT is the practical assessment task, but that is the practical exam. The final exam or the formal written exam is 200 marks, and the PAT is 100 marks to make up the 300 marks for tourism. We'll get to that a little bit later. Informal assessments, those are the things that you do in your class. Worksheets, open book tests, exercises, little class tests. Those are the things that does not count towards progression, but it tests to see if the learners are actually achieving the learning outcomes. Do they know the work that you have taught them? Just briefly about formal assessment. Grade 10 will write an internal final exam. So that means if you are a grade 10 teacher, you will set that exam, you will set the marking memorandum. Now it's called assessment guidelines. You will mark it, it will be moderated, and the child will progress based on the marks. In grade 11, the final exam is set externally but marked internally. Grade 12, they write a June exam, which is set internally, but they write two exams, a trial exam and a final exam, which is set externally. Now, all internal, all the SBA work, all the work besides the final exam, everything they do, the formal assessment, that must be internally moderated. Okay, so for internal moderation, you can invest in a green pen. So for your teacher toolbox, make sure you've got a red pen. That's the trademark. Then you can invest in a green pen, because you will be doing internal moderation. From you get a certain percentage, normally nine learners, or 9 exams, 9 tests, 9 projects will be internally moderated by another tourism teacher or somebody else in the social sciences department. Then you will take your 9 portfolios, tests, projects to a cluster meeting that we talked about last week, and for that you're going to invest in an orange pen, and at the cluster meeting or cluster moderation, a teacher from another school will moderate your 9 portfolios, just to make sure that we've all got the same standard. And this word SBA, your school-based assessment, that means literally all the assessments that's done at school. Now, I've mentioned that there's a recovery plan and that amendments have been made to the SBA. Now, most of you will finish your qualification at the end of this year, so you will either start teaching next year or in 2023. So until 2023, this is the school-based assessments that will happen. You will notice that there's no June exam in the recovery plan. They only expect you to write a June control test. You will still have your PAT, which will count 100 in grade 10 and 11. You will still have your November exam, which is 200. But there will be no June exam. For grade 12, it will look a little different. Your PAT will also be 100. November exam will also be 200. Normally in the first term in grade 12, this is the original one. You will see that there's a project. But for grade 12, in the amended assessment, SBA assessment, there's no project for grade 12s. The PAT, when we get to that, I'll tell you a little bit more, but the PAT, where it used to be a task that was done in class, now it will be treated as a formal exam. They will get, we're not quite sure at this moment, we're awaiting instruction and information, but it will be 2 4-hour exams where the learners have to complete this PAT. Normally they had we would work on it throughout the second and the third term. Now it's 2 4-hour exam sessions. 100 marks, that will make up the 300 marks for the final exam. Now, when we set test, CAPS tells us that when we set test, we must cater for the different cognitive levels. Now, the cognitive levels, this is where Bloom's taxonomy comes into play. We will look at Bloom's taxonomy now. But you must have 30% of your paper must be lower order questions, where you recall memory. What do you call somebody, a tourist that likes to visit the beach and that likes to relax? That's called a leisure tourist. Middle order, you're going to test, half your paper is going to be middle order. You're going to test understanding the knowledge and applying the knowledge, and then 20% of your paper is going to be higher order testing, where you're going to see, can they analyze, can they evaluate. with what they know. Then the CAPS document tells you exactly when you set the 3-hour exam at the end of the year, or for June, or for trials, that there must be 5 sections. This is the topics that must be covered in the 5 sections, and for each grade it tells you how much each section must count. Now, if you want to look at examples of exam papers, you can go to the website www.ecexams.co.za. That's the Department of Education of the Eastern Cape, and it's a wonderful resource to use if you want to find, if you're a teacher already and you want to give your children you want to give them exam practice. So the website contains both question papers and memos, and you'll find there's also grade 9 question papers for your senior phase didactic subject, or your method subject. So the CAPS document tells you there must be 5 sections. Then in the exam paper it tells you that in section A, it's question 1, it's short questions. Section B tells you, this is what exam paper looks like. That is what you're going to test in section B. That's what you're going to test in section C, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. So if you want to have a little look at an example, you can always, this is an example from a question paper on the EC Exams website. You can follow this link. I will also place the link on its own on ECI. If you watch I think it's also part of your prescribed learning. If you watch this video, it explains to you exactly what Bloom's taxonomy is, who Bloom's was, and how the Bloom's taxonomy work. I will try my best to explain it to you in simple words. So how does Bloom's taxonomy work, and how do we use it as teachers? Bloom's taxonomy basically say when people have different cognitive levels, or different levels of understanding or interpreting information. The basic level, the lower level, is remembering. The next level, that's a little bit more involved, middle order cognitive level, is we understand. So remember will be if I ask you to name something. Name 3 types of tourists. Understanding would be if I say to you, I have got 3 activities. I have got going to the beach, I have got bungee jumping, and I have got a conference. Which tourists, classify which tourists, or identify which tourists, which type of tourist will be interested in each of the activities. So Bloom's taxonomy basically says to us there's different levels of different levels of thinking, of taking information, and then our brains either remember it, it understands it, it applies it, it analyzes, it evaluates. And we can test different levels by asking different types of questions. So if our whole exam paper is just recalling facts, that's rote learning. That's learning like a parrot learning. Okay, just recalling facts. But if we understand the knowledge, we know a little bit more. If we can apply the knowledge, we know a little more. That bit you will find is your difficult questions in an exam paper. Okay, so this will be your easier questions, and those will be your difficult questions. And sometimes you will find that the learners that can answer the higher order questions, those are your learners that gets the 60, 70, 80%. Okay, your 30%ers, or the guys that struggle to pass, they are the ones that do well in the remember questions. Your 40, 50, 60 percenters are the ones that do well in the middle or lower order and middle order questions. But you have to include a certain percentage of each of these levels in your exam paper. Now, to make it a little bit easier, I have tabulated the different verbs you can use to start your questions with. So, for example, match column A, column B. Choose the correct answer. Where will you, if I can think of a simple question, where will you find more information about about marketing South Africa, or name the website that South African tourism use to market South Africa as a tourist destination. So plain and simple, remember questions. Okay. This apply the knowledge will be a little bit more difficult, and then the evaluate, the analyze, the create. You'll see there's a calculate question. Where's the calculate question? Somewhere there was a calculate question. So the calculate question will be, for example, if you do time zones, if you do foreign currency, compare, if you do, for example, if you do accommodation establishments, compare a backpacker's accommodation, sorry, compare backpackers to a hotel, compare a 5-star hotel to a 1-star hotel, classify the different services offered in a 5-star hotel, explain what is meant by a global event. So you will basically, for each question you set, start with a different Bloom's verb, depending on what level question you are asking. Obviously, you're not going to have like 700 different verbs. Some verbs you will use more than once. Okay, so I'm just looking at this verb, for example. Where is it now? Plan. Okay, plan a 3-day itinerary. Develop a tour budget. That's higher order thinking. Now, what I've done here is I've shown you that for lower order you have to have 30% questions in your test or exam paper. Now, this is exactly a question from an exam paper, we use the word choose the name of the world icon provided in the list below that best fits the location indicated on the world map. This is knowledge. You give them the icon, you give them the world map, they had to learn it, they just have to choose the correct name. Understand, explain to travelers entering South Africa what they can expect to encounter at customs control. Now this is a little bit more. They have to know that if you enter the country there's customs control. But now you're asking them, okay, there's customs, but what do people do when they get to customs? They have to know that their visas will be checked, that certain questions will be asked, their passports will be stamped. They have to declare if they've got any restricted goods, or if they're bringing in more than the allowed duty-free goods. So it's more than just tell me what is customs control. Okay, you can read through these questions, but these are examples of the different types of questions you can ask for the different cognitive levels. Now, the waiting for the test. Now, this comes straight from my subject advisor. Okay, so this comes from the Department of Education. So it tells you that the cognitive level, remembering 30% of your paper. understanding 20, applying 30, making up 50%, higher order 20%. Okay, so in other words, easy 30, moderate 50, difficult 20%. And all your tests and all your exams you are going to set according to this. If we go back to the verbs, what you can do is you can literally go through an exam paper and write down all the different verbs they use in an exam paper. You can type in Bloom's taxonomy verbs. Make a list, draw a column for yourself. Make a list of the different verbs. And when you, one day when you're a teacher and you have to set your test, you've got these verbs. So when you formulate your questions, you go and you find a verb. Which verb can I use for a middle order question, for a higher order question? Now your first assignment will be to set a test. And as I said to you, this comes directly from my subject advisor. This tells you that if you're going to set a grade 10 and 11 test, section A, your short questions, must be a minimum of 15 marks and it must be 30% of your paper. Okay. So then it gives you suggestions. You can have 5 multiple choice questions. You can have match column A, column B. You can have choose the correct word. Select the answer from a list. There can be a crossword puzzle. But please note, absolutely no true and false. We do not ask true and false questions in tourism. Section A, that's your short questions, 1 mark questions. Okay. We do not work with half marks in tourism. We work with 1 mark. And when it's a higher order question or a middle order question, depending on the question, you can award 2 or more marks. But for section A, everything is 1 mark. Then your longer questions, minimum marks, 35 marks. So you will see that a test, the minimum of the test should be 15 marks. Okay. We will talk more about what you can include in your test. But for now, what you need to know is minimum 15 lower order questions, minimum 35 marks, the longer questions. In grade 12, it's the same thing. But normally we ask in grade 12 that the test is a 75 mark test and that they write for an hour. When closer to next week, in our next lesson, I will go through setting a test with you. I will show you my tests, how a marking memo works, and that will explain exactly what you need to do for your assignment. But what you can start doing now is using this information. Choose a topic in either grade 10, 11 or 12 book. You can choose any topic. Look at the CAPS document, see what topic you like. And then using Bloom's, you can start thinking about, okay, I'm going to have a match column A, column B, and this is what I'm going to put in column A, column, this is what I'm going to put there. Make sure that you've got 15 mark short questions. Think about longer questions. Use Bloom's taxonomy and use the verbs to help you formulate the questions. And when you've got the questions, can I advise you immediately write down the answers so that you can compile your marking memorandum as well. So for this week's involvement tracker, you will find it on ECI, but this is basically what it's going to look like. I've given you this table that gives you the list of types of tourists, and then it explains what each tourist is. Now, all I want you to do, you don't need to use a textbook, just use this list. And then I want you to set 2 low order questions. So go and look at your low order verbs. You're just going to ask them to remember things. Okay. I want you to set 2 middle order questions, testing understanding. And I want you to set 2 higher order questions. Just on this information. Now, I've given you examples. Let's look at the next slide, and there will be examples. So, for a lower order question, now, guys, you don't just have to use words to set an exam paper, okay? A lower order question would be, for example, you can give them a picture like I've done here and say, name the type of tourist represented by each picture. Okay, that's a lower order question. Or you can give them the name of a tourist and you can put an activity on the other side, you know, a picture of an activity, and you can ask them match the columns. You can give them a definition, for example, and say, choose the correct word, a business tourist slash adventure tourist will attend a conference, and they have to underline the correct answer. That is lower order. Middle order would be a little bit more. So now you're going to tell them, for example, identify the type of tourist that will take part in each of the following activities. You will ask them, explain what a business tourist is. Higher order questions, compare. Now you don't just know this is a business tourist and that is an adventure tourist. You explain, you compare them. You say the business tourist will travel because he needs to attend a meeting, he goes for work, but an adventure tourist like adrenaline activities like skiing and bungee jumping. So their needs are different. Compare the needs. So I hope that is quite clear to you. So for the use the watch the video. Firstly, watch the video on Bloom's taxonomy. It's got to explain it beautifully. Use the verbs when you set the questions. Look at the table, the types of questions, their explanations. Set 2 easy questions, set 2 middle questions, and set 2 difficult questions. If you have any questions, you can email me. You have got my email address. You can contact me via ECI, or you can also send a question to me on our WhatsApp group. Looking forward to seeing you next week at our live lesson, which will be at 6:15, 18:15 on Tuesday evening. All the best, and remember to complete your involvement trackers.